Okay, there are two things that go together very well in this world: superstition and astrology. It makes sense. Astrology is very tied to religious and philosophical ideas. Many people live their life based on the principles of astrology. And superstition oftentimes can be a method of utilizing our creative intelligence, our creative imagination. So there's not necessarily something innately wrong with that. However, what I would like to encourage you to do with astrology is to try to pull away from the superstitious aspect of it. And that superstitious aspect is often the fatalistic aspect, where something occurs in a person's birth chart and now they think they're cursed. Or they see a particular combination of difficulty and they say, oh, it's bad karma. I'm going to have to pay off that debt. I'm going to have to learn that lesson. When it very well may be that combination for difficulty, a Saturn-Mars combination, is there because you're meant to be a strong individual in the world who can take a beating and keep on moving forward. It's a possibility. I remember one fellow astrologer, he was a Western astrologer, but he also worked as a psychologist, particularly with children, with troubled youth. And he had a pretty difficult third house. He had a debilitated Saturn with Mars, a few other planetary combinations that were rather difficult in that third house. And since Saturn was his ascendant lord, it made it a little bit worse. And when you see a chart like that, a lot of times astrologers will cringe a little bit for good reason. And this person definitely had a difficult life. A lot of loss, a lot of heartache, death, abusive family, these sorts of things. But he told me one time when we were having a conversation, we were having some tea. We like to go out to this Chinese buffet on Thursdays and enjoy the lo mein and drink some tea. But he said, you know what, Ryan? He said, a lot of people will look at my chart and say, wow, I cannot believe the things that you went through. But what he says is, it was those experiences, it was that Saturn, that Mars, that difficult sun placement, which allowed me to be able to work with these children who've also gone through hell with strength, so that I could be a guide for them, so that I could understand where they've come through, so I could know how to communicate with them, to interact with them. So that was a very good talk that we had together, because it shifted my viewpoint just a little bit to realize that yes, you can get beat down by some of these heavy planets. But within that beat down comes strength. That's why, for example, when Saturn is strongest, oftentimes that makes a person very endurant, very tough, very focused, and very disciplined. But what did it take to get them there? It took the harshness, the difficulty, the loss, the brutality of Saturn to harden them to the point where they could be that strong. So when we're thinking about astrology, we need to avoid the superstitious aspect of things. We need to realize that yes, Saturn is related to our amount of sorrow within life. But it also shows how much sorrow can we bear, how much can we understand, how much can we accept within our life. Oftentimes, we are prescribed things like mantras, or an astrologer will say, get a yagya done, or a particular kind of service will be recommended. And again, usually it's for planets like Saturn and so on. And I recently had a client ask my advice on particular remedies, and I advised a very long, lengthy Saturn remedy, 50 weeks of mantra for Saturn. I didn't say 40 days. I didn't say 50 days. I said 50 weeks of Saturn mantra, of providing service to those who are less fortunate on a Saturday. 50 weeks of it. That's a lot. That's a commitment. And the person wrote back and said, well, you advised a yagya, you advised mantra. I had another astrologer advise mantra, do mantra for Jupiter on Thursdays. And I tried to explain, it's like, the problems you have are related to Saturn. Doing a mantra occasionally on a Thursday is not a whole lot of effort and attention and time. So the reason I advised 50 weeks was so that you could tap into this energy, this consciousness of Saturn, of which you are a part, that you are serious, that you want to move forward with these things. So always keep that in mind, that oftentimes when we have serious problems in life, you're going to want a magical fix. I get it. I totally understand. Why did I invest so much money in gemstones? I personally love gemstones, so I do like gemstones. I will wear them for astrological purposes. Why did I spend so much time in mantra meditation? Why did I do all these things? Because I thought this will help me evolve, to grow beyond my karmas. And what I discovered with this whole process, and this was years of this kind of process, what I discovered was that remedies, and I know some of you are going to take issue with this. Many of you who have the idea that Sanskrit is a magical language and if you just pronounce it right, that the key of the universe will be unlocked to you. Maybe that's true. Maybe I missed the boat on this. But those of you who don't think that, what do remedies do? Remedies are for you to focus your attention and your intention. I have learned over these many years in meditation, Kriya Yoga practice, working with astrological remedies, that the best remedy is refocusing your attention and intention until that karma that's causing you problems exhausts itself, or you find a way to navigate around it or to grow beyond it. It's as simple as that. So when you're doing mantras, does it really help you to sit there and mechanically, without even thinking about it, with putting no intention behind it at all, does it help you to recite mantras thousands of times a day? Well, it'll be good for your meditation practice, and hopefully if you're doing it alert and awake, it will get you more focused. But is it really going to work with that planet itself unless your intention is to understand that planetary energy? Probably not. That is why so many people get involved in remedies and they'll say it doesn't work. Okay. What do gemstones do? Gemstones, yes, definitely have an energy, an aura, a capacity of their own, a crystalline structure of their own which resonates with a particular planetary energy. But you just can't pick up a rock and stick it on you and therefore everything works out great. The purpose of the gemstone is to focus your attention so that every time you see that gemstone, you remember, I'm honoring the sun. I'm honoring Mars. I'm honoring Saturn. Every time you take that pendant off at night and you say your mantras to it, you are redirecting your attention and your intention using that gemstone as the focal point. So this is not superstition. This is just learning to access and master the power of your consciousness. That's what this is all about. Now, we say this directing the intention of the planet or understanding the planet. Well, we need to think about that a little bit too. When we are doing mantras for Saturn, for example, or a yagya for Saturn, or any kind of remedy, service for Saturn, typically why are we doing that? Because we have an obstacle, a disease, pain, a problem that we want to be free from. And we think that by chanting these particular sounds and these particular words, that is going to unlock it. That is magical thinking. Over time, things will exhaust themselves anyway. And you might say, all those mantras worked. But let me give you some insights into how to work with the planets beyond superstition. And this is not easy. And many of you won't like it, and most of you won't even do it. But for those of you who can hear what I'm about to say, I think it'll benefit you greatly. Let's take Saturn, for example, because he's the one that most people want to work with. Well, when we want to work with Saturn, it's because we are in pain. We're feeling crushed. We're feeling oppressed. We don't know what to do. We can't understand where our inspiration lies. And we think that by chanting a mantra, that will honor Saturn, and Saturn will say, "Ah, great, you've paid me enough attention. I'm going to leave you alone from this point forward." And it may be that that's true. God knows how many Saturn mantras I have done in my life. More than I can imagine, more than I can count. But maybe it was these Saturn mantras that led me to this understanding too. So you're going to benefit from my own practice, hopefully, here. What I learned is that when I was in pain, when I was suffering, when I could not see the light of day, when I had difficulty, when I was scared, when I was anxious, Saturnine things, I was able to work with Saturn with greater intention and clarity when I didn't try to run off and go through an obsessive compulsive pattern of, oh, gotta do my mantras. In the same way that when people leave the house, they think, well, I can't leave the house until I turn this light off at least this many times. Okay, great, now I can leave. It's an obsessive compulsive thing. It's a weird thing in your brain, right? Did me going and flipping that light switch really make it so that now I can go off into the world safely? I guess it depends on how you think about it. But what if we took it another way and we said, I'm in pain now. I'm nervous, I'm anxious, I'm sad, I'm depressed. This is Saturn. If everything is an aspect of divine consciousness, this one consciousness, we call it God, the infinite abstract intelligence, I sometimes like to call it. If everything is that, then that also means pain is that anxiety is that suffering is that. And if every time I experience anxiety, suffering, pain, I say, nope, that's not me, that's not God, that's not divine, get it out of here, then essentially I'm creating division, and I'm saying, I don't really want to be one with everything. I don't really want to know the piece of connection to the wholeness of life. I only want to know this piece of it. And the more you do that, the more division you create. So coming back to this, what I learned is when I feel pain in my body, when I feel anxious, sad, depressed, anxiety, I don't run off now and say, I've got to do, 1,800 mantras for Saturn. I say, I honor you, Saturn. I sit down. I go through a little alternate nostril breathing to get centered. And I just feel that pain, that anxiety, that sadness, that suffering. Knowing that that is Saturn and that I am honoring Saturn by doing that. Because it's Saturn. I am honoring that aspect of divinity by doing that. And what happens? The pain may intensify. I may cry my eyeballs out. But by honoring it, by holding it, by being with it, feeling the grief, I am honoring Saturn. And then I understand what it was all about. And then Saturn says, if we're thinking of Saturn anthropomorphically, and then Saturn says, okay, thank you, and moves on, and maybe Jupiter comes in next. You honor Jupiter as well. But the point being that what I find is that people often get involved in remedies and practices not to actually honor the thing that's causing them the problem, but to get it away from them. All right? And the more something has a message for you, something you have to learn and grow from, and you say, get away from me, the more intense it gets, the stronger it gets, until you have to pay attention to it. Until you have that sorrow and you're just going to break down because there's nothing more that can be done there. But if you're able to attend to it as it arises throughout the day, throughout the month, throughout the year, not superstitiously, but by honoring it as it comes, then you are truly honoring that planet and you are truly working with that aspect of your chart consciously. The same way with Mars. Mars is aggression, initiative, fighting for our ideals, our strength of character, and so on. Well, is it going to help you to do mantras to Mars or Skanda or Kuja, Kartikeya? Probably a little bit, because it'll focus you, it'll calm you down. It's a meditation technique, it's a meditation practice. Or if you're having trouble taking initiative, or if you have trouble with anger, might it be more honorable to Mars, Kuja, Skanda, Kartikeya, by saying, here you are, you're visiting me now. I honor you. I'm not going to fight it. I'm going to pay attention. And if I get angry and I just want to scream, I want to go somewhere, and I'm going to do that to let it out. If I'm getting taken advantage of and I want to fight back, but I don't know how to fight back, I'm going to feel that feeling of abuse coming towards me, and I'm going to use that. I'm going to honor it as the energy of Mars saying, pay attention, find a way to build up your strength to either combat this or navigate it. There's nothing wrong with Mars. Sometimes you have to fight. Sometimes you have to cut out a tumor. Sometimes you have to tell someone emphatically, no, these are my boundaries. Nothing wrong with that. This whole consciousness, this whole beautiful existence is created by the beauty of Venus, the aggression and intensity of Mars, by the inertia and heaviness of Saturn, by the joy and unboundedness of Jupiter, by the insight and research, curious, fun-loving mind of Mercury, by the reflections and memories of the moon, by the inspiration of the sun. All these things, they are a part of our consciousness. And if we can learn to honor them really in the moment when they're there, rather than saying, oh, wait a minute, I gotta go do some mantras, you will be much more able to navigate your astrological influences. You will be able to become a more holistic, wholesome individual. You will know that the planets are not separate from you, that they're aspects of yourself. They are your ways of comprehending what's going on inside you, in the same way that when you're looking at a dream, everything within that dream, there's no other people in your dream. This is all reflections of you in your mind and consciousness. So everything in that dream is you, in the same way that the planets have that similar impact. So this is what I'm trying to get at when I'm talking about not being superstitious with your astrology, or even more generic than that. When people say, I've got to do mantras to the moon, I might have discussed this in another video, or maybe I did it in the apprenticeship courses, but it's like one time when I was teaching a Kriya Yoga course in Costa Rica, I was out in the ocean. It was a beautiful, beautiful day. The ocean was rolling in. I could see the moon. And I thought to myself, I need to honor the moon. I need to honor the ocean. So I started doing mantras for Varuna. I started doing mantras for the moon. And it just, everything stopped. I said, no, that is ridiculous. Why am I saying I need to do that when the moon is right there? The ocean is right here. The best way to honor these things are to just be with them, to sit with them, to observe the ocean, to take it in, not to close my eyes and say mantras to Varuna for the ocean, not to close my eyes and ignore the fact that the moon is right there. Same thing with the sun. Every day you see the sun, you can honor the sun. And the more that you acknowledge these aspects of yourself, even if it's in that more of a general sense, you're moving from superstition into a direct communion with these powers that are really just reflections of yourself. And ideally, I think that's what astrology will end up becoming for us as we move through into the future. A couple hundred years from now, it'll be less about prediction, less about get out of jail free cards, and it'll be more about how can I accept and honor the totality of my being, warts and all, depression and all, sadness and all, pain and all, dirt and all, along with the joy, along with the beauty, along with the radiance, along with the coolness of the water. Because if you pay attention to nature, that stuff's everywhere. Go for a walk in the woods. Probably 85% of the things that you are looking at is a dead thing, Saturn. Keep that in mind. But yet the sun still shines, the water still falls, the greenness still grows. And by paying attention to nature and seeing how it reflects into the planets, you can also start to see how your own nature need not be something that you divide up into compartments and that you ignore this part or you try to get away from this part. But you learn to try to embrace it all. And if you can do that, you'll be less inclined to worry about doing a mantra, doing a yagya, trying to appease an anthropomorphized idea of a power that is really just something within you. So there might have been some other points I wanted to make when I started this talk, but I think you get the main idea of what I'm getting at here. This is not an easy practice. So if this is something you're considering, I'm not saying cut out all your mantras, ignore all your gemstones. I still do mantra. I love doing mantra. It's just something that feels good to me. I still wear gemstones. I love gemstones. There's something that when I've got some extra cash and if I can spend on a gemstone that makes me happy, I'll buy it. Okay. Every now and then, if I feel I need it, I'll still get a yagya. But for me, that's just to help, to help jumpstart. It's like putting starters on a battery that won't start. Just let's get that car started, and then I'll try to take it from there. But if you're able to understand what I'm trying to get at, then think about, contemplate over time when you're feeling pain, sorrow, suffering, grief, and there's nothing you can do about it. Rather than running off and trying to do a Saturn mantra, just sit with it, be with it, and treat that as your time honoring Saturn. And you might find that when you make it okay to be depressed, to cry, to experience grief, that you don't hold on to it that much longer. Meaning, whereas before you might be doing these mantras to get rid of it for 6 months, because in a sense you're kind of ignoring it, that now you are looking at it right there. He's coming to visit and you're saying, okay, let's have a talk. And instead of keeping him at the door knocking for 6 months, you say, no, come on in. 30 minutes later, you feel like you got run over by a truck, shakes your hand and says, thanks for listening. I think Jupiter's on his way up. All right. So anyway, keep this in mind, and I hope this is helpful for you as you utilize astrology for greater self-understanding and to really be what I consider to be a fully functional, balanced, non-repressed human being, which is why we're all here. Otherwise, we wouldn't have these bodies. So it's a beautiful thing. Be well until next time.